haven't done in a while, but welcome to our center seat, and we welcome Libertarian presidential candidate Gary Johnson. Governor, thanks for being here.
Oh, great being here. Thank you.
Listen, Donald Trump has called you a total fringe deal, a fringe candidate, and disgraceful in his words. Here's the Real Clear Politics average. When you're added to polls, and this is the average of polls, you're at roughly 8.5%. We had a poll that had you at 10%. For people who are looking out there, and we're going to go over some of the issues that you're running on with your running mate, former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld, how do you do this? How paint the picture of how you win the presidency?
Well, first of all, I think Donald Trump had it nailed when he called me and Bill Weld fringe candidates. Perfectly nailed. I mean, Republican governors serving in deeply blue states, both getting reelected by bigger margins the second time than the first time, being fiscally conservative, over the top, and being socially tolerant, liberal. Totally fringe. How do we win? It's being in the polls. Investors Business Daily this afternoon came out with a new poll at 11%, which is really, that's very heartening. Only chance we have of winning is to be in the presidential debates, which is 15% prescribed by the Presidential Debate Commission. Only way we get it to 15% is to actually be included in all these polls. Since my name has appeared in 4 presidential national polls, there have been another 40 polls where my name hasn't appeared. So really, that's the key. I think that both of our records, Bill Weld's and myself, hold up under the scrutiny that go along with being at a recognized 10%, 12%, 15%. Doesn't go from 0 to 15. It works its way up.
Charles.
If we could start on a relatively light personal note. You have an interesting work history, as you say, 2-term governor of New Mexico. More recently, the CEO of a marijuana products company.
Yes.
Until January, I think you did say at the time that you used the company's products. Are you still?
Haven't used in probably about 5 weeks, and I've said that I'm not going to, as president. I don't think you want somebody potentially answering that red phone, and then going forward, not using going forward. But as the CEO of a marijuana company, marijuana products medicinally directly compete with legal prescription painkillers that statistically kill 100,000 people a year. Not one documented death due to marijuana. And I have always maintained that legalizing marijuana recreationally will lead to less overall substance abuse because it's so much safer than everything else that's out there, starting with alcohol. The campaign to legalize marijuana in Colorado was based on marijuana is safer than alcohol.
But you weren't using it medicinally, were you?
No, I was using it recreationally. I think the unforgivable in any human being is hypocrisy, and I do not want to be hypocritical.
Julie.
I don't know how to transition out of that, but I'm going to
we'll go to other issues.
Yeah,
sure.
I said it was a light
on immigration, President Obama has taken a lot of executive actions. One that has some support among Republicans and pretty wide support among Democrats is kind of prosecutorial discretion for the dreamers, the young people who were brought to this country by their parents and have gone to college, joined the military. What would you do with the dreamers if you were president? Would you allow them to stay without risk of deportation?
Yes, I would. And one untold story about Obama is he has broken up 3 million families. I mean, he has deported heads of households, 3 million, and broken up households. Look, I think Donald Trump's statements on immigration are just really racist. Talking about 11 million illegal immigrants, the deportation of 11 million immigrants, I think is just crazy. Building a wall across the border. Look, we should make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to be able to get a work visa. A work visa should entail a background check and a Social Security card that taxes get paid.
But
they are not murderers and rapists.
In terms of people who are still in this country right now,
illegally.
So you have the dreamers. How far would you extend prosecutorial discretion if you couldn't get legislation passed on Capitol Hill?
Well, I happen to look, as President of the United States, you shouldn't have to use executive order. It should be Congress. When he came out with these executive orders, I happen to agree with these executive orders, but I wish Congress were to act on all of this. It's really, when New Mexico, 48% Hispanic. What does an 11 million person crackdown amount to in New Mexico? Well, they knock on my door and, oh, gee, you're the former governor. Okay, you're okay. But they move to the next door because 50% of New Mexico is Hispanic. Let's see some papers.
But what about legal immigration? You just said you want to make it easier for people to come and work here. Since 2000, we've admitted legally 2 immigrants for every job created. So what specifically is the right number we should admit every year? So about 1.1 million running for president.
Get the government out of quotas. Look, there'll either be jobs.
So you're saying there should be no limit at all?
No limit at all. There'll either be jobs or there won't be jobs. And right now, an untold story is that there's a reverse migration taking place right now. There are more jobs in Mexico right now than the U.S.
It's factually untrue, actually. We're moving toward the highest level of foreign-born people in the United States at any time in our history. So, I mean,
but the jobs aren't in the United States right now. They're currently in Mexico. So you have, right now, you got Mexicans going back across the border into Mexico because there are more jobs.
Why are we getting 1.1 million legal people coming here every year? Because there are no jobs? I mean, are you saying that if we pulled all quotas,
well, I'm saying 1.1 million immigrants that are coming across the border illegally. That's a woman who is in Juarez. She can't get across the border legally, but yet there's jobs awaiting her in El Paso. So she's waiting across the Rio Grande with her kids. Look, make it as easy as possible for her to come across and get the jobs that do exist. And they are not taking jobs that U.S. citizens want.
Quickly, lightning round on the domestic issues. Taxes, you for a fair tax, flat tax, what? Whatever you can get through?
Count on me as President of the United States to sign off on anything that makes taxes lower. Make them easier to comply with. But ideally, if I could wave my magic wand, we would eliminate income tax, corporate tax, abolish the IRS, and replace all of that with one federal consumption tax. I ask everyone to look at the fair tax for how you dot the I's and cross the T's on how to make that happen.
Department of Education, no more.
Well, no more. Department of Education gives each state 11 cents out of every school dollar that every state spends, but it comes with 15 cents worth of strings attached. People don't realize that the Federal Department of Education, that it costs money to take money from the federal
funding on education ends under President Johnson.
Well, I can't wave a magic wand here. I get to sign legislation that Congress presents me, that they would have to present me with that legislation to abolish the Federal Department of Education. Yes, I would sign it.
And term limits.
Term limits. Silver bullet. I mean, come on. If you limit the terms of those that serve, they'll do the right thing as opposed to whatever it takes to get reelected. And that's the problem that we've got. Back to fair tax. Look, you implement zero corporate tax rate, you're going to issue pink slips to 80% of Washington lobbyists because that's why they're there, to garner tax favor.
And we're back with our panel and Libertarian presidential candidate Gary Johnson in our center seat. Charles.
Last week on C-SPAN you said the rival candidate you most identify with is Bernie Sanders, an avowed socialist. Is that mostly on social policy, or is it also on his, shall we say, isolationist foreign policy?
Well, I reject the notion of being isolationist. I think that, first of all, if we're attacked, we're going to attack back. We need to involve Congress. They've abdicated their responsibility to the president and the executive, and let's have a declaration of war. Let's have direction going forward. We have treaties with many, many countries where we are obligated to defend their borders that have not been ratified by Congress. They've been executive treaties.
Which of these would you rescind? Which countries?
I don't have the specifics. Actually, I'm looking for the list of specifics right now, Charles.
You did say that North Korea potentially was the biggest threat.
I think that is the case. North Korea being the biggest threat, that at some point these intercontinental ballistic missiles are going to work. This is something that we need to join arm in arm with China to address. They recognize this threat more than anyone. The big threat that we pose in the area is that we got 40,000 troops in South Korea. The ability to remove those troops from South Korea and have China address the problem that exists in North Korea is something that...
But far exceeds, in your mind, the threat from radical Islam and terrorism.
Yes, I believe that, yes. And that's not to downplay that threat either, but interestingly, you know, there were 200 members of ISIS after 9/11. Today there are 40,000. I think it has to do with our military interventions. Troops on the ground, dropping bombs, flying drones that are killing thousands of innocent people. I think that adds or aids their recruiting efforts.
But there are people who say that that's going to happen whether we're there or not. I mean, this is the whole argument about 9/11.
And by the way, yeah.
And whether we were in Saudi Arabia or we weren't in Saudi Arabia, they were going to still attack us.
And there's look, if we're attacked, we're going to attack back. And you can make the argument that we have been attacked by ISIS. This is something that we should engage in.
Staying on this theme, there's been this interesting debate in both the Republican and Democratic primaries about whether the U.S. is better off trying to push for dictators like Assad in the Middle East to be pushed out of power, or whether we're actually better off with them there because in some ways they actually tamp down.
Well,
where do you fall on this?
Where I fall on this is the unintended consequences of our interventions, and that the unintended consequences have made things worse, not better.
So do you believe that we're better off having Assad be in power without this civil war happening?
Well, you don't want to say for a second that you're better off, because there are actions that are atrocious, but we replace the atrocious with equally as atrocious.
I've got to give you the libertarian test. Now, you've said as a libertarian, you believe that people ought to be able to make personal decisions without interference from the state, which is why you support gay marriage. And yet there are many, many millions of people in this country whose religion either allows or commands them to take more than one spouse under polygamy. That's a felony. If you marry the mothers of your various children, you get charged with a felony. Are you for legalizing polygamy?
You know, I think that really is a state's issue. I don't think that's
on principle. I mean, why would that be a tough call for you?
Well, because it ends up obfuscating the goal, which is smaller government. Really, it's about smaller government. It is about people being able to make their own choices.
Do you feel that way about gay marriage? Would you be comfortable with the state banning gay marriage?
I would not. I would not.
Then why are you comfortable with the state banning polygamy?
I think that is something that would ultimately, potentially derail. It is personal choice, Tucker. It is personal choice. For a state to do that, a state can have at it.